Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 9th of May 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, and myself, Brian Gerrish. Let's get straight into the President.
So everybody will know by now, I'm sure, that President Trump has announced that the United States will be withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, which is called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Everybody's been expecting it for days. He made some what some people described as threatening comments regarding inward investment into the European Union, for example, if they didn't back him up on this. But he's announced that he's withdrawing from the JCPOA, and they'd be signing an executive order reimposing all of the US sanctions that were waived as a result of that deal. I mean, it shouldn't really be as a surprise to anyone because, of course, this was an Obama initiative, and Trump had said from the beginning that he would be doing this. So he will be putting this down as another tick in the box for a promise that he made on the campaign trail coming true. Nonetheless, let's have a look at some of the responses. Well, the European Union, in fact, Theresa May, Monsieur Macron, and Herr Merkel all made a joint statement which pretty much echoed what the European Union High Representative said. Ms. Mogherini said that the European Union deeply regrets the announcement by US President Trump to withdraw from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The JCPOA, unanimously endorsed by the UN Security Council, is a key element of the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and is crucial for the security of the region, she said. As long as Iran continues to implement its nuclear-related commitments, as long as it has been doing so far, and has been confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Agency in 10 consecutive reports, the EU will remain committed to the continued full and effective implementation of the nuclear deal. And for its part, Iran seemed to echo that sentiment. So that's the EU's response, deep regret. The Chinese response, well, China regretted the US decision to leave the Iran nuclear deal. That was given by Geng Shuang at their weekly briefing yesterday. So the EU, the UK, China, everybody regrets this. Israel's response was to bomb the hell out of Syria. So there you go with it. I mean, we'd heard that they were making preparations for this even before Trump had made his announcement. We heard that an announcement or advice had gone out from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to people in the Golan Heights to take cover, so it was pretty clear that Israel was going to launch a strike yesterday, and they did that within a few minutes or a couple of hours of Donald Trump's announcement. And of course, they say that they were only attacking Iranian air bases or Iranian bases in Syria, Hezbollah, basically. So that's their justification for that.
It is, Mike, but we have to say it does draw questions, doesn't it, on the power and influence of Israel, not only in US politics, but also UK politics. Everybody else will say they're disagreeing on policy, but they're still working in a discussion sense. They're still having meetings, but Israel is in the background. And if we don't get our way, then we are going to bomb other nation states. Is how it seems to work. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, in the meantime, the VIPs, the veterans in the United States, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity pressure group, who seem to publish their press releases through Consortium News, issued a release yesterday. Don't be played by bogus evidence on Iran, is what they said. They warned President Trump not to make policy based on Benjamin Netanyahu's half-ton document, as it was described, documents on the Iranian nuclear program. This was reference, if you remember, to Netanyahu's fantastic briefing that he gave last week with box files and CDs that appear to have come from IKEA or something. I'm not sure where he got them. But anyway, they, of course, are led by former leaders of the US intelligence community. This is a Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity group. And they're saying that that the evidence presented by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on April the 30th, alleging a covert Iranian nuclear weapons program, shows blatant signs of fabrication. That evidence is linked to documents presented by the Bush administration more than a decade earlier as proof of covert Iran nuclear weapons program. These documents were clearly fabricated as well. The Bush administration's account of how the documents on Iran got into the hands of the CIA is not true. We can prove the actual documents originally came not from Iran but from Israel, and the documents were never authenticated by the CIA or the International Atomic Energy Agency. So that's quite an incredible statement, because what they're saying there is that Israel pushed documents to the Bush administration, and then Israel used the documents which the Bush administration published in their justification for the criticism of Iran last week. Fantastic operation there. Vips goes on to say 2 former directors general of the IAEA, Hans Blix and Mohammed El-Baradei, have already publicly expressed suspicion that the documents were fabricated, and forensic examination of the documents leaded multiple signs that they are fraudulent. We urge you to insist on an independent inquiry into the actual origins of these documents. Okay, we can say that Trump has fulfilled an election pledge, but we can also say that once again he seems to have been taken for a ride. If what Vips has said here, and I accept it absolutely, then he's been taken for a ride on this issue. He was also taken for a ride when he sent the missiles into Syria a couple of weeks ago, and on the previous occasion as well. So I think he's showing a bit of weakness in his foreign policy.
And maybe his thought process as well. But of course, key to it, Mike, is the fact that we've now got to the stage where we can see that we cannot trust the intelligence services, be it American intelligence services or British intelligence services. What are they doing? Whose side are they really on? The moment you accept that there is real black ops amongst these people, Alex Thompson has written a very interesting article about this theme. You've got rogue elements. Is the information real? Is it there for a criminal cartel, or is it bona fide government information? You have no idea of knowing now. This is the problem.
Absolutely. Now, having said all that, the North Korean situation continues to develop, and it's very interesting. So, Kim Jong-un was in China day before yesterday, and he visited President Xi. This is the second visit, the second time, and this follows the summit in Beijing at the end of March. The Chinese news here showing an image of them together, and the comments made by President Xi were, Comrade Chairman made a special trip to China to meet me again just after 40-odd days. At a crucial time when the Korean Peninsula situation is undergoing profound and complex changes, this embodies the great importance that Comrade Chairman and the Workers' Party of Korea Central Committee have attached to the relations between the two parties and the two countries, and to their strategic communication. After the first meeting between me and Comrade Chairman, both China and North Korea relations and the Korean Peninsula situation have made positive progress. I feel happy about it. So that was his position. And in the meantime, the Chinese premier was arriving in Tokyo for an official visit, and this was a Chinese, Japanese, South Korean leaders meeting. This is the first leaders meeting between the three countries for quite some time, and again, we're seeing this kind of diplomacy going on in that part of the world.
Without them bombing each other.
Without them bombing each other. It's quite amazing. But of course, let's not forget that Mike Pompeo has just discreetly headed over in that direction as well, and he was meeting up in Pyongyang for the second meeting with, in preparation for this is the second meeting with Kim Jong-un and preparation for the Trump summit, which is going to take place imminently. And as Reuters are reporting, Pompeo's expecting to return to the United States with some released U.S. citizens that have been detained in North Korea. He said, well, he wasn't really sure whether it was going to happen, but he was looking forward to the possibility of it happening, and he was very hopeful that it was going to happen. So Again, we sort of see this dichotomy, this schizophrenia within US foreign policy. I'm waiting with bated breath to see what actually comes of this, all this diplomacy in Korea, and whether we get this situation knocked on the head.
What's happening, very difficult to tell, Mike, but it's almost like there is actually a breakdown in the political process in America. We're seeing it here as well. We don't seem to have coherent politics which move in a sensible, common sense direction. It's one thing one minute and one the other.
Well, we seem to have different people working to different agendas, which is a very interesting situation within what's supposed to be a sovereign nation state with a common policy within its cabinet.
So how do other countries form their policy against that shifting background? Very, very difficult. Well, let's move on with a smile on our faces to what we're going to call a UK column exclusive, and that is the UK government is to destroy our national chemical and biological defences. This is a bit extraordinary in the climate at the moment, Mike, isn't it? Because the government is consistently saying that we're at risk from terrorist attack. Let's have a look at how this pans out. Disbelief as UK drops all Novichok and chemical bioweapon defence. We just remind people that this was Public Health England. This is the screenshot of their website from a few days ago, and on that website, of course, they were saying that cleansing wipes, baby wipes in fact, were absolutely a key part of dealing with chemical and biological agents, it would appear. So they said that if you've got a little bit of pure military grade nerve agent on you, no problem, Novichok, no problem, you should use baby wipes. Yes. But now the government has said that wet wipes are going to face the chop, because apparently they've got plastic in them so they don't degrade. So we're going to get rid of the wet wipes. And what do they have to say here? The government says the plan is to eliminate plastic waste, and that includes single-use products like wet wipes. So I don't know how we're going to be able to defend ourselves on this one at all, really.
No, it does look like we're heading for pretty dark times in Novichok defence.
Novichok defence. If anybody doubts what we're saying, get onto that Public Health England site. You should be able to read it, unless, of course, it's mysteriously disappeared. Okay, right, let's just have a look at what we've got coming in here. And basically the BBC, obviously talking through this thing, said the government said that it planned to eliminate plastic waste, and including wet wipes. This just brought into my mind the fact that the BBC, of course, also getting into schools to help children become fake news literate. Yes. So this is quite extraordinary stuff. I want to remind people about all this. So James Harding, who was originally the BBC head of news at the time, he's since left the job. He said, "Never has it been so important for young people to develop their critical thinking and to be news literate and have the skills to filter out fakery from the truth, especially on their busy social media feeds. BBC News, as the most trusted news provider and home of Reality Check, is ideally placed to bring this product to schools and young people around the country." So I described him there as hallucinating, that this man believes that BBC is the most trusted news provider and ideally placed to teach our children anything. And I just wanted to say that parents really need to be aware of what's happening, because this report is from December 2017, but the programme from March this year is up and running. 1,000 schools in this first tranche, as they say, offered BBC mentoring to teach children that, of course, BBC News is the only real news. So if you're a parent, I suggest you might like to be warning your own children, and indeed having comment to the schools who are getting themselves involved in this programme. We just illustrate life a little bit with the BBC's news website this morning. What caught my eye was bottom left. Let's bring it on screen. The Grenfell couple transformed into a fairy tale. An Italian couple who died in the Grenfell Tower fire block become heroes in a new storybook. So we've got death becomes a cartoon, which becomes main centre stage BBC News. I think this is applied psychology, Mike, and I think it's designed to mess with people's heads.
I have to admit, I find that quite unpleasant.
It's offensive, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think so. So if you agree with us, we say don't just sit at home and feel unhappy at what's happening. It's time to get on the phone to your MPs and to the BBC themselves. Difficult task, because you go through Capita first, and to actually make your feelings felt.
Now, yesterday, Spinwatch, who had managed to get hold of the 2 D notices, which were issued over the Skripal affair, published those. If you want to find that, it's headlined "Revealed Rebranded D-Notice Committee Issues 2 Notices Over Skripal Affair." And they say Spinwatch can reveal that the Skripal affair has resulted in the issuing of not 1 but 2 D-notices to the British media, which are marked private and confidential. We can also disclose the contents of both notices, which have been obtained from a reliable source. The 2 notices were issued. The 2 notices were issued has been confirmed by the D-Notice Committee. The committee, which is jointly staffed by government officials and mainstream media representatives, has recently changed its name to the Defence and Security Media Advisory Committee. They use the word advisory is no doubt a bid to discourage the public from thinking that this is a censorship committee. However, the DSMA notices, as they're now officially called, are one of the miracles of British state censorship. They're a mechanism whereby the British state simply advises the mainstream media what not to publish in notices with no legal force. The media then voluntarily comply. Well, that's perhaps a little unfair for being totally objective about this. Of course, they always have the gun over their head of whether they will get access to future government press briefings, government press releases, and so on. Basically, it is a voluntary opt-in to
Process,
actually to accept these D notices. But of course, if they don't accept those D notices, they're shooting themselves in the foot if they want access to press releases and press briefings and so on. I question in the modern world where the value of receiving press releases and press briefings from the government, but there you go, they feel the need. The article here from Spinwatch goes on to say the provisions of DSMA Notice 05 therefore apply to these identities. Of course, the D notices themselves weren't about the Skripal affair in general. They were specifically about the identity of intelligence agency personnel who were working with the Skripals. And the main name that I believe they wanted to hide was that of Pablo Miller, because of course that potentially links the Skripal affair to the whole Russiagate affair and via Christopher Steele and the dodgy dossiers. So anyway, in any case, get onto that Spinwatch site and have a look at the D notices for yourself. And perhaps you might want to ask your politicians, MPs, what the value of these documents is.
Yeah, but what it represents, Mike, is censorship of the press and media by the British government. Why do they want to do that? They've got something to hide. If they've got something to hide, we need to know what it is. So people who are good at research, this is just the sort of area to get digging.
Well, let's look at press freedom, because Reporters Without Borders, who we don't particularly like ourselves, but they publish an index every year about the freedom of the press internationally. And the United Kingdom there, as you can see it ringed on the right, stays in the 40th spot on the list. We apparently have less press freedom than countries like Chile and Estonia. So we should be proud of that, I suppose. But here we go. It continues because, of course, the beginning of the real shutdown in press freedom in recent years was the Leveson inquiry. As time has gone on, the effort to shut the freedom of the press down via the Leveson inquiry appears to be less important, because the press continues to voluntarily shut down its own freedom at the moment. But if we go back a year to Coventry Live, they published this article, "These stories would not have been revealed under controversial law plans." And what they were concerned about was Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act. Now, Leveson 1 had resulted in Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act, which basically said that if a media organisation or a press organisation refused to sign up to a Leveson-approved state regulator, that press or media organisation, if they were sued in the courts, even if they won, their court case would be subject to paying the legal costs for the other side. The media were complaining about this bitterly a year ago because although it had never, that particular section of the Crime and Courts Act had never actually been activated by the government, the threat was hanging over their heads that it would be. So this article really expressing concern about that. Well, what's happened then in the last 24 hours or so is that Tom Watson has brought an amendment into the new data protection legislation, which will attempt to activate this Section 40 clause from the Crime and Courts Act via this data protection legislation. So lots of people are complaining about that. And then secondly, Ed Miliband, the former Labour leader, is also bringing forward an amendment to the data protection bill, which if it passes would establish a new statutory inquiry into data protection issues in the media. So this would be in lieu of Leveson Part 2. So from the Labour side, there are major attempts to bring this process forward that originated with the Leveson inquiry. And I'm just going to say again, Brian, I don't see the need because we have an utterly compliant press at the moment. There's no particular requirement as far as I can see. And in fact, so compliant are the press that the government, the Conservative Party and the government in particular, are writing to the press's defence at every opportunity. So in the face of Tom Watson and Ed Miliband's amendments to this data protection legislation, our former digital minister and now Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, Matt Hancock, was writing an opinion piece in the Telegraph this morning. Press faces darker future if MPs vote for greater regulation. And in this article, he goes through the points that he basically made in a speech we covered at the time a couple of weeks ago, where he's made it clear that he absolutely defends the British press and media. He's so delighted with them. And in his speech a couple of weeks ago, if you remember, he said that the government would bring forward legislation at the earliest possible moment to completely repeal Section 40 of the Crime and Courts Act. So this is really where he stands at the moment. He is particularly concerned about accuracy. He's particularly concerned about real threats to British media, to our society as a whole, and that those threats come through disinformation, also known as fake news. His concern is that individuals who are publishing online are untouched by media regulation. The press, of course, some people don't particularly like the form of regulation that they have at the moment, but they are regulated. He is defending the current situation, despite the fact that it was his government that was attacking the press in 2011 with the Leveson inquiry. He also said that he trembles at the thought of a media regulated by the state at a time of malevolent forces in politics. Get this wrong, and he fears for the future of our liberal democracy. That's a very clear statement. He doesn't mean it in the sense that he wants to see a press that actually operates to hold power to account. But nonetheless, he's making a clear point. He launched a few weeks ago, if you remember, the Cairncross Review, which will explore whether intervention may be required to safeguard the future of our free and independent press. And what he's saying is that, forget Leveson 2. We don't want to have Leveson 2 in the form that was originally formulated. He admitted and has been admitting for several weeks that press regulation, as was originally envisaged, is no longer a valid approach. And in fact, he is so concerned about so-called disinformation and fake news that it may require the government to step in to protect this free and open press, which holds nobody to account other than to hurl disgusting abuse at independent journalists and to try to shut down events which are there to try to hold them to account.
Yep.
So this is a spectacular situation that we have, and a real divide between Labour and Tory at the minute, it seems, because Labour is still trying to cling on to this old narrative from 2011, which really isn't valid anymore.
No. Well, as you were taking us through that, Mike, somebody in the chat room said this is totalitarianism coming in. Immensely dangerous because we lose what's left of free press and media, and we are in that totalitarian state. So let's just bring in a reminder. This is Global Research here. Article by Eva Bartlett, she is talking about American journalists killed in Turkey for revealing the truth regarding ISIS-Daesh. No investigation 2 years after suspicious death of American journalist Serena Shim. So we're not finding this in the BBC or across the mainstream media, and this is the type of reporting that the Western governments, the Western establishments are so frightened about. Let's have a look at the lady herself. She was reporting this: Turkey enables the crossing of foreign terrorists freely into Syria. She also spoke of the funneling of arms via the US airbase in Turkey to terrorists in refugee camps and through to Syria. And she highlighted the issue of terrorist training camps portrayed as refugee camps guarded by the Turkish military. And we'll just give a little bit more. She named the World Food Organization as one of the NGOs whose trucks were being used to funnel terrorist arms into Syria. And she stated this in her last interview just 1 day before being killed. Notably, in that interview, she also explicitly stated that she feared for her life because Turkish intelligence had accused her of being a spy. So this is the price that people pay for real journalism and getting information, facts and truth that, of course, Western propagandized media will not put out. And this is why particularly the UK state is so desperate to close down proper alternative free media. I think it's pretty obvious what they're trying to do, Mike.
Yes. Now, good news on Media on Trial. A venue has been found in Leeds for this event following the Leeds City Museum's withdrawal of the contract that they had to host the event there. So although the picture is still of Leeds City Museum there, there is a new venue. I'm not sure exactly when tickets are going to go back on sale for this. I believe that there are about, with the size of the new venue, there'll be, a reasonable number of tickets still available. As soon as they go back on sale, probably later today or tomorrow, we will let people know. But the event is on, and I know that some people that I met at the weekend at AV9 had bought train tickets to get down to Leeds for this. So I'm glad to say that they will be able to use those tickets. Well, there is a determination amongst the organisers to make sure that this event goes ahead. I think it's needed more than ever, and details will be on mediaontrial.uk in due course, I'm sure.
And is it remarkable, Mike, to sit here in UK, in Britain in 2018, and we're having to warn people about the need for press freedom. If people still don't understand how serious this situation is, they need to, and perhaps attending that Media on Trial event would be a good way of seeing what the real problem is. Well, let's just recap from yesterday. We showed this man, Sergeant Tangy from Devon and Cornwall Police. He's one of Devon and Cornwall's armed police officers, but he also boasts that he's an award winner for tweeting. So whilst most people believe that our police are out there protecting the public, this man spends a great deal of his professional time tweeting. This was, This was his effort from yesterday, and we pointed out this very, very dark, sinister image, but he was saying, if you want me to catch criminals, then let me using the least violent way I can, but it's not a precise science, so don't hound me and persecute me if someone gets hurt. Catching criminals is, quote, a messy, violent business. And we said, what was in this man's mind? Personally, I think he's been reframed, which is taking him into a very dangerous place. But this is him over the last few hours, more photographs worshipping guns and automatic weapons. Am I alone in thinking that this man needs some
Help?
needs some help? I think that's a good way of putting it, Mike. And if this is permitted by Devon and Cornwall Police, is this also happening in other police forces? This very dark, dangerous mindset which says, give me a gun, an automatic weapon, and I'm going to go out and solve crime, but it's going to be dirty, bloody, messy. So nasty stuff. Once again, it's up to people to get those letters and emails in to ask Devon and Cornwall Police why this man is permitted to make these sorts of social media pronouncements.
Now, one of the policy areas that we've been watching very closely is the transformation of the courts and tribunals service. You know, we're increasingly seeing the removal of juries from court processes and putting decisions in the hands of one judge or three judges. And if you remember going back a few months, this blog post was made on the court's blog site, on the government website, Transformation Courts and Tribunals 2022, designing a public law service to meet user needs. And this was Emma Petty, Service Manager for the Public Law Project, providing an update on the project, its aims and how it's going to be delivered. She said that before the project started, she had shared her early views on how existing e-working practices might be improved through a public law project. Since then, the project has launched, and they've launched an event with colleagues and partners, such as local authorities, CAFCAS, and legal practitioners. And of course, local authorities are supposed to be independent from the judiciary. The judiciary is supposed to be independent from local authorities and the court service, as is CAFCAS, is supposed to be independent from everybody. And legal practitioners are supposed to operate on the behalf of their clients, when in fact they seem to be partnering with the court service. So it's all very strange. But anyway, just as a reminder, this is part of a £1 billion modernisation programme of the justice system in the UK. Well, yes, today the National Audit Office has published its report, Early Progress in Transforming Courts and Tribunals. And they're looking at how well spent this money is. Well, as I say, when the government announced this programme, it was going to be a £1 billion modernisation programme. Unfortunately, the National Audit Office has discovered that, in fact, costs have already risen by 200 million, so it's now a £1.2 billion modernisation programme. So they make some points about it, but it's a generally positive report. You know, we understand things are a bit late, and we understand things are overrunning and cost a little bit, but you know, they're doing a good job in meeting their aims. We're not sure they can meet their aims quite on the time scale that they say that they can, but generally it's a very good program, and we're not going to criticize it too much is really the thrust of this report.
So the days of accounting for every penny of money spent out of the public purse, those are long gone. It could be $1 billion, it might be 1.2 billion, but it's not a problem.
Not a problem. So, you know, what are we talking about here? Well, in the government's response to this report, they highlighted their key areas of reform. Some of them are more serious than others. So they talk about a fully accessible online civil money claim service, giving the public the ability to make a small claim online, with over 3,000 claims issued in the first month. A new system for applying for divorce online, which has cut errors in application forms from 40% to less than 1% apparently. A new probate system in testing, which also cuts errors, speeds up the process, and has a satisfaction rate in excess of 90%. I have to say, when we're talking about probate and therefore the transfer of property ownership from one person or body to another, a satisfaction rate in excess of 90% means that there's almost 10% of people that are involved. There's some process of transfer of property where almost 10% of people are unsatisfied. I find that a bit concerning. But anyway, we move on. The first ever fully video hearing took place in the tax tribunal as part of a pilot to test the potential for the use of video more broadly across the courts and tribunal system. Now, you know, when we've discussed this in the past, Brian, you've highlighted Melanie Shaw taking part in a video link from her prison to the court. But even there was a court with human beings in it and a video link. and it was only one aspect of the process that was outside the court. Now, in the point that you made was that that video link broke down, and therefore Melanie didn't get to represent herself properly. That's bad enough. But now we're moving to a position where they're testing the situation where the entire court hearing takes place by video only. That means there's no opportunity for the public to witness what goes on in that hearing, unless their intention is to live stream it. And I don't see any evidence that that is their intention. I find that the most concerning aspect of this whole thing, that we take justice to a fully online process where the public has no access whatsoever. That's really dangerous, I think.
I think it's very dangerous. And of course, the other thing that doing stuff by video link does is it removes the real human interaction. If you are in close proximity and you can watch how somebody speaks, the mannerisms they use, how they put across their evidence, how they declare their innocence, those can be very, very strong clues for people as to what sort of person you're dealing with. A fairly vague video link, which is often the case, means that you're getting detachment from that human interaction. So it's dangerous. Right, quick advert for Saturday, which is now approaching fast, the UK Column Dying for Good Health Conference, which is in the Albert Hall, Nottingham. Start time is 10 o'clock, but a lot of people have told us that they want to buy tickets at the door. We're delighted those people are coming, but this gives us a logistics problem. So if you are intending to turn up and buy your ticket at the door, please ensure that you are there well before the conference start time, I beg your pardon, because we have reason to believe that we're going to get a lot of people. So consider getting online and buying your tickets. That helps solve the problems for us. And if you can't attend this event, perhaps you would help us by promulgating it and making sure everybody who's interested in health and what's happening to health at the moment know about that conference. Thank you. Right, well, I've put it as this: the EU beast reveals itself. What's the headline? Well, actually, it's the Morning Star. The EU only for the few. Doug Nicholls condemns the EU's preemptive strike against the Labour manifesto and election victory. And I found this a very interesting article, because basically they're saying that senior EU officials told the Times that they were toughening their stance in increasing anticipation of a Labour general election victory. Labour now has public spending and ownership and industrial regrowth at the core of its programme. Remember, the Conservatives had declared they were going for a period of destructive initiatives in the public service. Danny Kruger was one of the people who talked about that. But the EU getting upset because they think that a Labour government could reinstate subsidies, and this, of course, would give a problem to the European Union. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Mike.
Don't really have any at this point.
Okay, we'll see how that develops, but obviously something is unsettling the EU at the moment.
Yes, well, let's look at this. Of course, Boris Johnson spoke out yesterday about this new customs partnership that Theresa May has been trying to promote at the moment. And the Times here, their headline is Boris Johnson dares Theresa May to fire him over customs. And what I'm going to say about this is I believe this is another example of the cynical use of Brexit to push forward with personal agendas, never mind other agendas hidden under the surface like EU military unification and so on. But there's clearly a faction fight going on within the cabinet at the moment. And this is part and parcel of it. Now, Amber Rudd, as we know, in the last week or two, fell on her sword over the Windrush affair in order to protect Theresa May's position. And the replacement Sajid Javid is someone who falls on the May side of the camp. But Boris Johnson clearly has his eyes on the Prime Ministership and the leadership of the Tory party. So he has come out and tried to position himself in a pretty cynical way as the hero of Brexit. by saying that Theresa May's plans for a customs partnership are nonsense. Theresa May's plans for a customs partnership, of course, are nonsense, but that doesn't. That I'm being specific about Boris Johnson's motivations in saying that. Anybody who thinks that either Theresa May or Boris Johnson are the heroes of Brexit really aren't paying attention, I think, and that's the key point.
Yeah, so you've mentioned personal agendas there. Let's move on to this. We've got a new head of the army, and the report is from Deborah Haynes here of the Times. Army to appoint ex-Special Forces officer as new chief. I find this absolutely fascinating, Mike, because of course this is exactly the sort of man who has been out with the Special Forces Afghanistan, and we're starting to say, well, who has set the mission for these people? Where was it decided? It wasn't debated in Parliament, so presumably it's been just decided as a mission within the Cabinet Office, but then we go a step further and say, who were the individuals in the Cabinet Office that decided what action was going to be taken? Is that routine, is that process now going to be expanded across the whole of our armed forces? That was what was in my head. So let's have a look at this gentleman. Lieutenant General Colton Smith was educated at Eton. That's always a good start. Commissioned into the Irish Guards in 1982. In the coming years, he passed selection into 22 Special Air Service Regiment. Little is known publicly about his time with the elite unit because of its secretive nature, but he was a standout figure from his intake and rose up to be given the prize post of commanding officer of the regiment in 2002. So my question is, what was this man doing? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know who he was working for. We don't know what his missions were. We don't know anything. We, the public, are just to accept that he was put out into this role. Don't ask any questions, otherwise a D notice is slapped on it. Okay, well, let's go on a bit more. He told the Times in October of that year, as he prepared to hand over command to an incoming brigade, that the Taliban would never be defeated. A prediction that's been proven correct over the passage of time. He said that in his opinion, a military victory over the insurgent group was neither feasible nor supportable. Well, that's been proven to be correct, as the article is saying. So what were the lives of the troops being wasted for, Mike? We've got a man, we don't know what his mission was, we don't know who was ordering him to do whatever he was doing, but we know people were dying in quite large numbers, and he says, well, this is a waste of time because we were never going to beat the enemy, and this man has now become head of the army. I think this is very sinister. I think this man has been brought in so that more dark operations can be carried out in more countries using more equipment from men and equipment from the wider army, from the wider military.
Because that's his background, his experience,
Yeah.
That's what he knows what to do.
Yes, absolutely. I'll just bring in a little bit of fun, really, because who helped appoint him? Well, the article says, relax, because it was Gavin Williamson. So let's remember Gavin. There's been a number of cartoons about him. I saw this one online. So credit to the gentleman, if I can read the name there. It's Howard McSweeney. I'm going to say, Howard, thank you very much for producing an excellent cartoon.
Yeah, this was the bit that grabbed me as well about this story. Gavin Williamson, he went for a series of interviews with Gavin Williamson.
Yes,
Gavin Williamson is qualified in what way to interview this man. This guy is an expert in his field, and Gavin Williamson knows nothing about anything. So
fireplace salesman, I think it was.
Yes. So there's a disparity here.
Yeah. Well, leave people to think about what that means, but my key point is, if we don't know what Britain's military are actually doing overseas, who's controlling them? Is it the British government, or is it some sort of banking cartel? I'll just drop this one in because it brought a smile to my face. We're having a service at Westminster Abbey for Stephen Hawking. This is remarkable, of course, as he basically doesn't agree with the faith of the Anglican Church, but they're so sure that it's going to be well attended, they're having a lottery as to whether you can get a ticket for it or not. So I felt it was a little bit like a turkey and Christmas came to mind. And of course, this is the same Anglican church that can't put on any services for child abuse survivors, even though that a number of youngsters were abused by that very church system. I'll leave people to think about that. We'll end on the note that we're now forming regional agencies to speed up adoption. So this is one taking place in Liverpool area. And if we have a little bit of a look at the detail in this one, it follows a successful bid to the government last year by local authorities on Merseyside to create a new organisation to get more children placed as quickly as possible. It's all about efficiency, grouping up. We can't do it in individual authorities, so we've got to group up into super authorities, and we're going to get it so that we can get as many children through the system as fast as possible. Into adoption. Just make that a bit clearer. They quote some individuals. I decided to take Barry Kushner here, Liverpool City Council member for Children's Services, and he said this proposal will mean we're able to provide a better service for children and adopters. At the moment, each local authority is effectively competing with each other for adopters, and there's a great deal of duplication of effort. By creating a regional agency, we'll be able to widen the net of potential adopters, share expertise and ideas, and make sure adopters and children get a consistent level of support regardless of where they live. What doesn't he mention at all? Well, he doesn't mention parents. The whole thing is about speeding up the process of getting the children, getting them through the court system, of course, where people make vast amounts of money, and then getting those children into permanent adoption where they will never see their families again. So well done, Mr. Kushner. Regional agency, part of the super state agenda, Mike.
Yep.
We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us. Last thing before we go is that there is an individual who is desperate to get to that Nottingham Health Conference. They need to travel from Bognor Regis to get up to Nottingham. So if there's anybody who's travelling from somewhere in the area of Bognor Regis, can they get in touch with the column? Email me, brian@ukcolumn.org, and we'll put the various parties in contact with each other. But I have to say, this individual deserves to get to the conference, but they need help with transport. So if you can help, please do. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.